And at the end of the day, those wounds are going to be ours. We are in relationship with those wounds. We're always in relationship. You're in relationship with your friends, you're in relationship with your following. You and I, even though we've only been on here for just a few minutes,
We just
we
started, guys. We're
we
new.
we are in relationship with each other, and we're also in relationship with ourselves and all of the things that come along with us, the good, the bad, the ugly, everything, which means that we're in relationship with our woundedness.
Yes.
And so
Guys, just for y'all tuning in, she is talking about the wounds and experiences. So continue, Dr. Bates.
when it comes to healing our woundedness, I think one of the things that sometimes people, I think they misunderstand is that when you start talking about healing, you're completely healed. You don't have to worry about the woundedness anymore. You can just kind of move on with life. And that's all fine and good. But when you think about woundedness, you I think about a maybe a scratch on your hand, right?
Oh, I like.
You have a scratch on your hand. Maybe when you were a kid, you ran into some barbed wire and you ended up having to get a stitch or two in your hand because you ran into that barbed wire. Well, that was maybe what, 10 years ago, maybe? And initially, when that wound first happened, it hurt. You saw it, you looked at it every day, it looked ugly. You probably wish that it hadn't been there. You probably wish that you hadn't run into that barbed wire and did what they told you to do, but you were being hard headed and then you went and ran into the barbed wire anyway. But you have this wound on your hand that over time, if you do what you are asked to do, and that is don't pick at the stitches, let it just heal. Make sure you put the healing balm on, make sure you allow it to get some air, don't let it get infected. If you do the things that you are supposed to do to heal that wound, it's going to heal, but it may still leave a scar. And so 10 years later, that wound is healed, but there's still a scar there. You can still see where that wound was worse than what it looks like now. And oftentimes with our emotional wounds, it's very much the same. It doesn't necessarily mean that the wound is completely gone, but what it means is that your relationship with that wound has shifted and you are in a healthier relationship with your wound, okay?
I love it. Guys, for everyone tuning in, I hope you're hydrated. I hope you've regrouped. And maybe you've even texted an ex or someone who's hurt you in life. But welcome back to What's Going On with Swag Her Magazine. I'm still Topanga. We're still sitting here with one of the realest, Dr. Dion Bates, a licensed therapist, truth teller, boundary pusher, and softness protector. And if you thought the first half was deep, baby, we haven't even got to the bottom of it. Dr. Bates has no idea what I have up my sleeve. Dr. Bates, are you ready to turn it up? Because I
Oh, no.
got some questions.
Oh, no, girl. Come on. Oh, no. But okay, go ahead. We're going to see what happened here. Go
Okay,
ahead.
this is
I'm
our
listening.
spitfire round. So, Dr. Bates, you have to say what you have to keep saying what right off your head. Dr. Bates, when someone says I'm tired, what are they really saying, Dr. Bates? What are they really saying?
Well, usually when someone comes into my office and they say that I'm tired, I will typically ask, how do you say you're feeling tired emotionally? Because a lot of times, I deal with the emotions, and I think, being able to identify and articulate how we're feeling emotionally is extremely important. And again, remember I said before that, many of us grew up in cultures where we didn't necessarily have permission to express how we were feeling about something. You know, why are you feeling sad? You ain't got nothing to be sad about, that kind of thing. And so when it comes to our emotions, we have a hard time identifying what they are. So I'm not quite sure what part of the country you're located in, Topanga, but here,
Atlanta, Georgia.
oh, you're here in Atlanta. Okay, cool. So, you go into Publix, and when you get to the cash register, one of the first things they ask is, did you find everything okay? How are you feeling today? And usually my go to is, I'm well, thank you. How are you? But well is not an emotion, right? but it's something we'll say, yeah, I'm well, I'm good, I'm okay, those kinds of things. I'm all right, I'm so so. None of those are emotions. Those are qualifiers to emotions. And so typically when I see people in my office, the first question I'm going to ask is, how are you feeling emotionally? And
Ooh.
sometimes I get individuals who say, I feel tired. And I'll probe a little bit more. Okay, now are you feeling emotionally tired or physically tired? And they may tell me both, or they may tell me I feel physically tired. And then I'll probe a little bit more. Okay, well, then tell me how you're feeling emotionally when you feel physically tired, right? So I think different people are going to place a different meaning on tired. And I think that's the important piece that, we have to consider, is that different people attach different meaning to different things, to different experiences. And so from where I sit, it's really important for me to get an understanding of the meaning they're attaching to whatever that situation is. And so to your question, what are people saying when they say that they're tired? They can be saying a lot of different things.
You decode the you're
They can
decoding the
really and truly be
language.
physically tired. They can be saying I'm frustrated. They
Yep.
can be saying that, I'm angry. And that's one of the reasons why I probe a little bit more, because, you can have two different people to say I'm okay, right? And one person might be like, yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay. Another person might be like, yeah, I'm okay. Yeah, don't even worry about it. I'm okay, right? And so you have two different tones there that give you two different meanings of what okay means. And so that's why I think it's more important to try to probe a little bit more. One person can say I'm okay or I'm tired, and they can say, I'm tired. Maybe they're feeling frustrated, maybe they're feeling sad. Another person can say I'm tired, and maybe they're really feeling pissed and just ready to go off.
Yeah.
So it just kind of depends, and I
You've
think
learned
that
how to decode the language of emotional burnout in our community. You've literally got it down
mm,
to a science. You know how to decode it. And that actually is a gift in itself, to be
mm.
able to read through that language and understand the difference. So I applaud you for being able to recognize that and dig through that. Because
Well,
it
I
is.
think, but to that, and I appreciate that, but I think what's important is that I try to recognize that people have a right to decode how they're feeling themselves,
Woo!
right?
They have the authority to do that of their self.
Exactly, because we are the expert on ourselves, right? We've lived with ourselves for however long we've been on this earth. And so we are, even if we struggle emotionally and we don't necessarily have the verbiage to articulate what it is, we still know what we're feeling. I think just for a lot of us, it's a matter of, one, allowing the person space and holding space for them to sort through the verbiage, and that might take a little while. And a part of it is holding the space so that they know that it's okay, that even though it may take a little while, you can do this, right?
Yeah, you can. You can. You definitely can. And holding that space, having that grace, creating that safe place for people to go through that. I love that. Giving people
Mm-hmm.
the authority. Um, we talk about authenticity a lot. We talk about boundaries in therapy. We could sit and strip away your degrees and your titles and your roles and affirm who we already know you are, Dr. Bates. But I'm gonna get a little spicier.
Girl, for somebody from, where are you from? For somebody who's from Atlanta, you
I am
sure
not.
are
Oh no, no. I
spicy.
am from
You
Atlantic City. I
sure
am
is
from.
spicy.
I'm from New York and New Jersey, Atlantic City. So yeah.
Oh, you're a Jersey girl. Okay,
So
yeah, y'all kind of spicy.
so let's get them. Let's do some. Let's bring the smoke. Let's get some emotionally rich questions for the brilliant Dr. Bates. Dr. Bates, in a world that's obsessed with how we look, How do we learn to feel again? Not just emotionally, but centrally. Let's talk pleasure. Let's talk performance. Let's talk intimacy on other levels. How do we show up and how do we learn how to feel again in a world that's so obsessed and hypersexual?
Hmm. Okay, so I want to make sure I'm understanding the question. So when I hear hypersexual, when I hear a world where looks are so important, I think one of the first things that comes to my mind is where is the intimacy? And I think for a lot of individuals, sex and looks is synonymous with intimacy, and they're not, right? And when you're talking about cultivating intimacy with another person, of course, it's important that you learn how to cultivate that intimacy with yourself. And I think, like you said, in a world where looks are really important, particularly here in Atlanta, it's kind of like the LA of the South or the Hollywood of the
The
South, right?
LA of the South, the
Where
Hollywood South,
where all the
yes.
pretty people live, right?
Hmm.
But a part of it is, I think, making the decision that you are going to have a deeper relationship with yourself, because pretty only lasts for so long, right?
It only lasts for so long.
And I think that, and again, going back to what we were talking about before, we're in this age of healing. And I think that a lot of people, even if they're not necessarily vocalizing it, I think that there are a lot of people who are taking seriously this idea of developing a better relationship, developing a better intimate relationship with themselves, because again, in this world that strives on looks, we also want to have a meaningful relationship. And even though a person may not necessarily be vocalizing it, again, social media, television, and all of those things, one of the really great things about it is that you've got all these different people who are sharing, what it is to be interested in building intimacy, the importance of that. And so even if someone is not necessarily running in circles where they're talking about this, they're getting it, they're listening to it.
You're
But I
understanding.
also think that the other piece to that is that because information is more accessible to us on these kinds of things, like developing healthier relationships and looking below the surface at yourself and at people, I think that people are beginning to gravitate toward other people who have the same interest, or
Yes.
they're gravitating towards events that help them to cultivate this and give them this skill set and this knowledge base.
I agree. I agree. I agree. What is your views on, sorry, we're gonna take it there. What are your views on healing through touch? Is sex ever sacred or is it trauma bonding with good lighting? If we push the convo about intimacy and connection, is there a therapeutic way through it? Is there healing through it? Or people trauma bonding and they just make it look good with filters?
I think it's both. You know, so many of the people that I see, um, sometimes there are experiences that they've had that, again, is so normal to them that they don't necessarily realize the way that the way that the trauma has manifested, or that what they experienced was traumatic, and how that trauma is following them through other relationships. And so sometimes we have to spend some time helping them to kind of look at the patterns, looking at their patterns. And I think sometimes when we come from those cultures, because we all come from a culture, but when we come from those cultures where there was a lot of trauma, whether it be emotional trauma, whether it be physical trauma, sexual trauma,
Trauma
whether it be overt trauma or whether it be covert
or
trauma,
trauma.
right? Um, what happens is a person, once they get outside of that culture, and they go into a different culture, they can start seeing how, the things over here that I experience, I don't see them over here.
I
And
don't
these
see him
people,
here.
and so some of it, I think, is yes, we may go through periods where we are bonding with other people through our trauma. Um, but it's a process. I think that touch is definitely a healing mechanism. Touch is healing, but also understanding what touch feels good for you. Also understanding that you have the right to say whether or not you want to be touched and how you want to be
To be
touched.
touched and those
Okay?
boundaries around that.
Yeah.
Yes. So if somebody says yes, but their spirit says not yet, how do you help tell them the difference between um chemistry and comfort? Like what embodiment versus escape. How do you help them show up and advocate for themselves?
Chemistry versus comfort. That's an interesting comparison because I think for so many of us when we think about chemistry, there's a certain level of comfort that we're looking for, right? And comfort is not always our friend, okay? Particularly if we come from a culture, right, where I always say you can't go back to the culture that made you sick and think you're going to be healed. Okay.
Ooh,
And obviously, when we leave our culture, we take some of that culture with us. And, if we end up going and attracting something similar, because because I think innately, instinctively, we're looking for something that is comfortable.
mm-hmm.
But just because it's comfortable, just because there's a chemistry there, it doesn't always mean that it is healthy. Okay. And so sometimes it's not so much about looking for chemistry and it's not so much about looking for comfort as it is about looking within and trying to look at, especially the patterns. How has looking for comfort and looking for chemistry, how has it benefited me and how has it impeded me? How has it impeded my healing? How has it impeded my growth, right? And so when you're talking about healing, I think we have to ask deeper questions. We have to go beyond, is this comfortable? Is this, is there a
Escape.
chemistry here?
It's a chemistry, yeah.
We have to ask, you know, is this something that is going to be in alignment with my healing? Okay. Because just because it's familiar doesn't mean that it's healthy. And just because it's unfamiliar doesn't mean that it's unhealthy.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes, if you are not used to being in healthy environments and doing, healthy types of things, then when you do those things, it's going to feel uncomfortable. It's like lifting weights. You go into the gym, you're lifting the weights, you come out, your muscles they hurt, your arms feel like noodles, and you go back the next day, you don't work on your arms because your muscles need time to
Time to.
rest.
Mm-hmm.
So you work on a different set of muscles, but you have to build that muscle. And a part of it is learning how to, one, build the muscle of emotional tolerance, right?
Yes,
Because,
tolerance.
because at the end of the day, we all want to be happy. We all want to feel joy, but happiness, joy, those two are emotions, and emotions can ebb and flow, which means that just as we have the capacity to experience joy and happiness and excitement, we also have the capacity to experience sadness and um, anger and boredom and anxiety, all the emotions we don't want to experience. But because we're human, at some point in some time, those emotions are going to roll back around again. And so we have to learn how to, one, be comfortable in the here and now, And we also have to learn how to be comfortable with sadness. We have to learn how to be comfortable with happiness,
Mhm.
understanding that, in this next moment, I might be feeling bored, or in this next moment, I might be feeling discouraged, and still being able to handle feeling that with the understanding that in this next moment, you know what? I might be feeling excited. I might be feeling, you know, um, encouraged. I might be feeling, any number of emotions that we consider to be positive.
Right, you're right. And in those emotions, in those emotions, I love how you break it down and you literally aren't talking down to us, you're talking to us and your feet in our soul. I know the people out here, someone in the audience just commented true. I think people are understanding how you're breaking it down, and that is so important. Delivery is everything.
Mm,
I also know that, as I spice things up with these questions, I'm asking these questions with intention because I have a bigger purpose. And what I'm trying to get to is
Ashe.
the next question leads up to you've done your research on identity and development and the LGBTQ issues. How does identity and sexuality and gender shape your therapeutic needs for clients?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think that's a really great question as well. Um, in everything we do, or let me rephrase this. It is my opinion, and just based on my clinical experience, that in everything that we do, identity is related to it. Okay. And, we, first of all, we're not one-dimensional beings, right? We're not one-dimensional beings. We're not a monolithic people. Um, we have various aspects of who we are. You know, we have our sexual identity, we have our gender expression, we have our how we identify with regards to our career, we have how we identify in terms of our spirituality, we have how we identify in terms of even our finances. So we are not a one dimensional being. And so for a lot of my clients, that's kind of where I start. I always start with we have multiple dimensions or multiple identities that make up us.
We are.
And sometimes with my LGBT clients, they're coming in to try to sort through some sexual identity issues. But sometimes it's really not about the sexual identity as much as it might be about, a some sort of life transition, whether it's a career, whether it's a relationship, whether it's, having to be the caretaker of a parent, or, and things like that. So I want to throw that out there first.
I feel
When,
like
go ahead.
I feel like the fact that you dig deeper and you dig beyond the surface and really get to the root of it is important because sometimes people hear identity or LGBTQ and they're LGBTQ and they're so surface level with it. Um, and I think it's important to talk about how your therapeutic needs of your clients are being met beyond the surface. So that's why I really appreciate the answers that you're giving me right now.
Yeah, sometimes it's not about the sexual identity or the gender identity. Now, don't get me wrong, sometimes it is. But there are times where, a person has a history of depression just because they just have a history of depression, right? It doesn't really have anything to do with
Integrating.
their identity per se, but perhaps the depression has to do with the fact that they're having, issues in their relationship or issues finding a mate. That's not much different than someone who does not identify within that community, right?
Yeah.
Uh, However, sometimes it is about issues related to their gender identity or their sexual identity. and how to come to terms with those things, or how to not just come to terms with those things, but
Mm-hmm.
how to be affirmed by other people, whether it be their friends, whether it be their family, whether it be their church, whether it be their job, or whatever the case may be. So it's, again, we're not one dimensional. It can sometimes be multi-layered. And I think that's, again, going back to, we are all we're the expert on ourselves, right? And so allowing a person to come into the office and tell me what it is they're there for. Because I will get people who will say, well, yeah, my mama told me I need to come. My wife told me I need to come. My boyfriend told me I need to come. And the first thing I'm asking is, well, do you think you need to be here? Because if you don't think you need to be here, we really don't have a whole lot to talk about, right? Because if we start dealing with issues that someone else feels like you need to deal with, then treatment is just not going to be effective. It just
Effective.
isn't. It never is.
So when we talk about treatment being effective, do you think that what makes you, outside of your degrees and your professionalism, your experience, do you think people connect with you because it's authentic? They feel like you represent the community authentically.
Hmm.
In short answer,
You
what
know,
makes them trust you with their queerness?
you know, I don't know.
Because
I
is
do.
is do you think that you
I
need to
mean,
be a part of? Do you think that, because I see this. When I go to therapy, I don't mind white therapists, but I do see people say, as a black woman, I like a black woman as my
sure,
therapist. Do you feel
sure.
like queer people are more trusting with queer therapists, or do you think it's case by case?
I think it's case by case. And I say that because, when I first got into mental health, I was working in addictions. I've never been addicted to anything. Now, I've done my dirt, but I've never been addicted to anything.
Oh, we'll get
So
back
I
to the
can't,
dirt.
so
We'll get
I
back to the
can't,
dirt.
I'm sorry.
We'll
So
we'll get back to it.
I can't speak to what it's like to be addicted, right?
Hmm.
But when it comes to connecting with someone, say from, you know, perhaps if it's a person who is of color, yes, I can connect with that, and we may even have had some of the same life experiences, um, even though I've never been addicted to anything, right? Or it might be someone that connects with me because of our ages, even though I've never had any types of addictions. Because we are closely related, by age, perhaps we've had similar experiences from that standpoint, and we can connect with each other like that. I think the other piece is that, and I can't speak for my clients, but what I can say is that really I try to provide a space for individuals um, to just be, whatever being looks like. You know, if you want to come into the office and sit in the chair, fine. If you want to come in and sit on the floor, fine. You can do that. I might even sit on the floor with you. But I just try to cultivate a space for people to just be, and cultivate a space for people to get comfortable to just being, without there having to be any jumping through hoops, or without them having to be a certain way. And I think, it sometimes takes more time um, doing things in that way. But I think in the end, to your point, it really is about the connection. I really want to connect to I want to connect to the soul of the person if I possibly can, um, and start the healing from that level.
Hmm. And in that healing, do you find that clients do, like, if they're talking on the phone, do they want to know your gender? Do they want to know your age? Do they want to know if you're black? Do they want to know if you're queer? What lets them let that guard down? Do they ask these questions? Is it okay to ask these questions? Is it an invasion of privacy? Should it not matter? Should people not be looking for these things?
Sure. again, that the answer to that question is going to differ based upon who you talk to. Okay. From my standpoint, um, I welcome those questions. One of the things that, and I think I said this before, it is important for me to provide my clients with the skill set to advocate for themselves. Number one, you have a right to advocate for yourself. I don't care what anybody has told you, you have that right. And so it starts right here. And if you, whether it's, I don't care what kind of service provider it is, you have a right to ask questions of that person, and certainly questions that are appropriate. So if you are asking, are you Black? Are you white? Are you a Christian? Are you atheist? I don't steer away from those questions. I just think that, if that's what you need in order to be able to feel like you can start your healing process, then sure, ask. I usually, when people call me and we talk about what their needs are, I am quick to tell them, I am not for everybody, and I am okay with that.
Yeah.
And that's why, when you think about the assessment, it's not that I'm just assessing you in that first session. I make sure that I have them understand that they're assessing me too. They are trying to also see if I am a good fit for them.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, they are.
I might not be. And again, I am okay with that. And at the end of the day, what I want to make sure that what I want to make sure that I'm doing is getting you connected to who you feel is the best fit for you. And if it's me, great. If it's not, okay, let's see what we can do to get you connected with someone who might be a better fit. But in terms of the healing process, yeah, I want to cultivate a space for people to, one, not only feel affirmed, but also learn how to affirm themselves if they're having difficulty doing that, right? Um, because again, you have a right to affirm yourself in whatever way that looks like. And sometimes what that means is we've got to explore who we are. We've got to examine who we are. We've got to start thinking about the things that we like about ourselves, the things that we don't like about ourselves, the things that we don't like about ourselves. Do we want to change those things, or are we okay with just being that way? And that's fine too. And then once we get through that, then we have to start looking at what does it mean to heal oneself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in healing oneself, what does it look like for you to affirm yourself? And then taking your affirmed self and going out and affirming other people.
And affirming other people. Could you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. The last thing I heard you say was affirming other people.
And affirming other people. In this self-soulistic model of affirmations, and we're affirming people and letting them know they have permission to show up for themselves and affirm themselves. For Black queer women who have historically been overlooked and marginalized in therapeutic spaces. I'm going there.
Mhm.
How can mental health professionals better hold space for people in their full identities?
Well, I think first of all, continuing education, learn what it is to hold space for and in this since we're talking about Black queer women, learn what it is to hold space for Black queer women. um, it's interesting when I used to work at Georgia Southern University, and I used to be the safe space coordinator. And one of the things that, or the ways in which I trained individuals about affirming other people is that it's not necessarily a dichotomy in terms of, yes, I affirm you, no, I don't affirm you, or yes, I accept you, no, I don't accept you. Oftentimes it progresses in stages. So it might be that, I can affirm the fact that you identify as queer, right? But perhaps I have not gotten far enough in my affirming process to be able to affirm you in, I don't know, getting married. And I'm just using these as examples, okay? And so I say all of that to say that taking time um, to learn, taking time to learn and to um, become more informative about the community and putting forth initiative to do that, I think is really, really important. I think the other piece too is it's important that for therapists who are not necessarily the most versed with the Black queer community, sometimes you have to be humble enough to say, I don't know. Can you share that with me? Right? In school, we were taught cultural competency, right?
I'm familiar.
And over the years, many therapists, myself included, have veered away from cultural competency to cultural humility. Again, it kind of speaks to what we've talked about a little bit before, and that is you are the expert on you. And so for those therapists who may not necessarily um, have a background in working with Black queer women, um, I don't encourage you to run away from working with Black queer women. Now, if that is a population you don't want to work with, don't do it.
Don't
Okay,
do it.
just don't do it. Okay, but if it is a population that you are interested in, that you're genuinely interested in, I would not necessarily encourage you to run away with it. But I think you need to approach it from the standpoint of there's a lot I don't know,
It's a
but
lot
I
I don't
am
know.
but I am willing to do what I need to do to gain the knowledge, whether that's through continuing education, whether that's through, going to seminars and conferences, whether that's going to a queer event in the community, whether that is reading books. A really great place to go is Kara's Books if you haven't been there. Um, so just really taking the initiative to demonstrate that you are really interested in working with this community and helping this community, um, and just being honest about where you are,
Hmm.
you know.
Very transparent and honest for sure. Got to be. You got to be honest for it. You got to be honest where you're at in
And
that
and
journey.
and, and the other thing, and I'm sorry, Topanga, the other thing that I would say, as I've mentioned before, with therapists who are working with Black queer women, understanding that this community is not a monolithic people. Not all Black queer women do the same things, like the same
Well, it's a
things.
spectrum of people.
Exactly. Yeah.
The spectrum of people, there's no, and I hate the stigmas. We talked about it in last week's session with Coach Charity J. We talked about it as in the femininity, the masculinity, and even in that, or the fluid, or it's
Mhm.
so many layers, the non-binary. It's so much within Black female queer women that is just the fetishized community that fetishizes like the feminine Black queer woman, and she's
Yeah.
more socially accepted as to where the more masculine queer woman is more in danger, or it's just so many layers to it on that spectrum. And I also spoke on that about acknowledging it and not pretending it doesn't exist and acting like these things aren't happening, like turning a blind side to it. No, these things happen. This is a community that's unprotected, that has stigma, that is told to dress a certain way, be a certain way, present a certain way, for other people's comfortability. So don't get me started. We can go on and on and on about that, Dr. Bates. When we talk about navigating through visibility, when sometimes the world wants you to either speak for the moment or hide in the margins. We could go deep about that in the queerness. We could talk about what safety looks like in queerness, whether it be
Yeah.
physical safety, like literally out in the streets, or just protecting yourself mentally, masking, emotional, safety,
Yeah.
intimate, yeah, intimacy. A lot of queer Black women are taken advantage of intimately.
Yeah, yeah.
It's so many layers to that, Dr. Bates.
It
So many.
is. And understand that, even though we have come, I think, a very long way when it comes to, LGBT rights, the visibility of Black queerness, there is still heterosexual privilege is still a real thing. It's still a real thing. Yes, we've made leaps and bounds, but with regards to the LGBT community, but heterosexual privilege is still a very real thing. And I think it's something that for individuals, particularly for my colleagues who do not identify as being Black and queer or anywhere on that LGBT spectrum, there has to be a recognition and an acknowledgement that, you know, there's still a certain level of privilege that you present, even being in the room as a heterosexual therapist working with someone who falls on that spectrum.
it really is. And it's like we talk about, you know, privilege, being accepted, being authentic, at what cost?
Mm,
At what cost?
yeah,
Free from, what are we free from?
right.
You know, you
And
know,
that's real, and that's one of the reasons why, it's never a good idea. It is a no-no to encourage someone to come out if they're not ready to come out, because unless you can promise them that you can replace for them what they might lose by coming out, it is not your call. And people are still losing their lives for coming out. People are losing, particularly, young people. They are losing their families. They're losing, you know,
community.
their
Yeah.
they're losing their ability to pay for college. You know, you
The
know,
right to be in the military soon.
Exactly. So there are a lot of rights that are being, from a federal level that are being rescinded. But even if we don't even talk about the federal level, talking about the things that they're losing with regards to their families, with regards to their communities, because either they're outed or they're encouraged to come out before they're ready to do so.
Mm. To you, how has queerness expanded your capacity to love, and not just romantically, but spiritually, creatively, just showing up? How would you say queerness has, expanded your capacity and showing up for people and be able to advocate for them in all spaces?
Um, that's that's a very good question, and I pause because I think the first thing that came to my mind was, you know being on this journey of being, excuse me, being on this journey of being, not necessarily more authentic, but being on this journey of affirming who I am and loving who I am, um, in all of the multiple dimensions, even my flaws, even I think just being able to be okay with who I am. And I think the more comfortable I am with who I am, it gives me the capacity to just be better able to accept people for where they are, and it be okay. It doesn't have to be right or wrong. Sometimes things are not right or wrong. Sometimes they're just different. And
They're
I
just
can,
different.
and I've learned how to be okay with different. Um, but I also think that, um, just being able to be okay with who I am, why I am, um, where I am, I think allows me additional emotional capacity to be more present when it comes to relationships, right? And I think that's important.
That is important.
Mhm.
What do you want the next generation, since we talk about there's not always a right or wrong, sometimes it just looks different. What do you want the next generation of Black queer girls to never apologize then for?
I don't
Mic
know.
drop. Mic drop.
Um, I would hope that I would hope that they have the courage and the bravery to not ever apologize for being who they are. Understanding that courage and bravery does not negate that fear may be something you're experiencing, but in being able to move through the fear and not allowing the fear to get you stuck, right?
Mhm.
Um, I think that that is important. Um, yeah, I think it's important, and I hope that they will have the courage and the bravery to never apologize for who they say they are.
And is that why you developed self-solistic, the model of affirmations is for people, to affirm who they are in their everyday sense and show up
Good,
authentically?
good question. So I want just so it's self solstice.
Solstice.
Yeah. And so the way that so first the short answer to your question is yes. And I I think I when did I start? I started conceptualizing that model probably back in 2009, 2010. Um, it wasn't published until 2012, but it was important for me, having been in Atlanta, and being, being in the community and realizing that for a lot of activists in the community, um, it was disheartening for me to see individuals really preach inclusivity while at the same time excluding folks, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was really challenging for me. And and when I looked at that, it really and truly, it was kind of a come to Jesus meeting I had to have with myself, because at that point I had to ask myself, well, how are you showing up?
How
Are,
we
are, are
show
you
up.
are you are you showing up in a way in which you are affirming yourself? And so, yeah, for me, it was looking at the process of self affirmation, but also doing research, seeing that there were a lot of academic writings on self affirmation, and there were a lot of academic writings on um, affirming other people, but there was nothing that I saw in the writings that bridged those two. And I actually started looking at the work of Claude Steele, who is a Black social psychologist who he comes out of Stanford. I think he's still at Stanford. Maybe I think he's still at Stanford. But anyway, in the 80s, he did a lot of work on self affirmation, or particularly with children of color. And so one of the things that I did was I kind of went through, I looked at the literature that existed. And the way that the model reads is there are 4 stages to affirming self and others, not just self, not just others, but affirming self and others. And the first stage is self-examination, where you actually have to sit with yourself, free of the distractions, free of the TikTok, free of whatever y'all be doing on social media days, free of all that stuff, right? Getting rid of the distractions long enough to take time to sit with yourself and examine who you are. Again, the things that you like about yourself, the things that you don't like about yourself. And that's important because so many times we get stuck on the things that we don't like about ourselves that it's hard for us to remember the things that we do like about ourselves, or it's hard for us to remember the achievements that we've made, right? It's almost kind of like, I don't know if you're familiar with the term chasing the dragon, but we'll say, hey, I want to write a book,
Mm-hmm.
and we write the book, and almost before we're finished with the book, we're ready for the next thing, and we're ready for the next thing, never really taking the time to sit with this huge accomplishment and what it feels like to accomplish something like this, right?
Yes.
And when we get caught up in chasing that dragon and things start to go wayward for us, we
Mm-hmm.
end up being so focused and consumed on what's not going right,
Right.
as opposed to, well, you just wrote this other book and it
You just
became a
did
New
this
York Times
amazing thing.
bestseller.
You just did something
Did you
amazing.
even take the time to sit with this accomplishment and acknowledge that this is something that you did? So self-examination, the second stage would be self-healing. So the healing of those things that we feel like we want to change, and accessing the appropriate support system in helping us to do that, and the appropriate skill set that we need to do that. A third stage is self-affirmation, affirming ourselves in terms of what we feel is valid and true for ourselves. That's what it means to affirm. And then to externalize that affirmed self to affirm other people. Again, not necessarily agreeing with what they say or what they don't say, but you are affirming what they say is valid and true for them. So if you say to me, if you say to me, Dr. Bates, I don't want to be called Topanga, I want to be called Topan. Now, in my mind, I might be like, okay, well, that's interesting. I wonder what made her decide that that's what she wants to be called. But okay, that is what she feels is valid and true for her. That's what we gonna do, you know.
Yeah.
So it's four stages: self-examination, self-healing, self-affirmation, and self-externalization, as a way of, and it's just my contribution to the field, to the literature, of what it is to not just affirm oneself, not just affirm um, other people, but what it is to affirm both self and others.
Mm. Mm. And when you're affirming others, are you spreading that message to the queer community at the upcoming conference? Do people want to know, will you be attending the Black Queer Women's Conference and spreading
I
those
will be
affirmations?
attending. I will be attending. I am really excited about it. Shout out to LaJoya Johnson. Um, but yeah, that is, I think the conference itself, the existence of the conference itself, is a testament to the affirmation of Black queer women. But as I said before, you know, we are not one-dimensional beings.
Hmm.
That's only one aspect of individuals. And so for me, my hope is um, to be able to contribute something that helps people to understand that, one, we're not one-dimensional beings. Two, there is healing that takes place throughout each of those dimensions. And healing is not linear, it's not linear. And you may find that you're progressing in your healing in one dimension of your life, and maybe over here, healing has kind of been put on pause. And so once you get to a certain place over here, you give attention to this part of who you are over here. And so it really is a process, and a process where if you can stick with it, I'm a firm believer that you can get to a place in your healing where you want to get to, with the understanding that it's about where you want to get to, not where other people want you to get.
And I think, the conference means so much to people professionally or personally. It's not just a moment, but it's a movement. It's a
Mhm.
space that needed to be awakened. I actually am going to attend the queer conference. I'm really, really excited to see
Okay,
what's going on there.
it would be good
You
to meet
know,
you.
as a former queer woman, well, I don't know if I'm ever a former queer woman. I think
Wait,
that
did you say a former queer woman?
I don't
Now,
know if
wait
I'm
a
a,
minute.
I don't know if I'm a, I don't know if I'm a formal.
Now, I believe in minding my own business, but see, we out here
Oh, we could get
on this,
spicy. We
we
could get
out here
spicy.
on this, we out here on this public forum, and I'm sure
I
the
don't know if
listeners
I'm
want
a
to know. Can you
former.
please expound on
Okay, so since we're going personal, guys, I have always identified with the LGBT community.
that? Okay,
Um, I was married to women twice. I was a part of that community, and when I decided that I was not going to date women anymore, the Black queer community wasn't too nice to me, and that experience has happened with a lot of lesbian women
it
in the queer
has.
community,
Yes, it has.
especially in the Black queer community. They are not too keen to people that. I mean, it's a difference if you're bisexual and then
We
that
we
happens.
we're gonna accept you, but if you try to leave us,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
gonna
Like,
burn
like, like, like,
down the stake.
like, and this is what, yeah, like, it's a difference if you're bisexual and you're in the queer community. That's different because people already know you're presenting that way. If you're pan, if you're fluid, but if you're a lesbian specifically in the queer community, and then you go to leave, and I decided that, for me, just for me, Doc, dating women was very, very traumatic to me. I had mommy issues because my mom was an addict and I clung to women for codependency, and it showed up in how I dated, and it clouded my personal judgment. So I would attach these women not for partnership, but for codependency and to nurture wounds. And I wasn't dating women in a healthy way. I was diving into them and loving them and giving my
Mhm.
all and all of this just to feel that intimacy and love from a woman. So I decided to step back and do some healing. And in that journey, I mean, I was pretty down bad. I mean, I think I got divorced and got married an hour away in the next county to another woman. Like I was deep in. I was deep in.
Okay.
Um 2013 was a crazy year, but I'm 36 by the way. But I say that to say that I started to date men, and I found happiness in that, and I still had my sexual attraction to women. I don't think that that's something that I can get rid of. I prayed about it and asked God, I don't want to just be a part of the queer community just for sexual desires, because that's not what it is. And I don't want to represent it like that. But I did get in a space where I no longer wanted to date women, but I did want to engage in sexual activity with them. And I didn't know if that was right representation. I didn't want it to be a fetish or just something to do. So that was okay. And I took a step back from that. And I do date men. Of course, I still have my desires and cravings for women. They're beautiful women. But for me, I don't like to misrepresent the queer community. So I don't like to say that I'm a lesbian when I know that I only desire them in a space that's sexual, and I don't think that sends the right message. And I don't know if I'm always going to have the platform to explain that or that. So I try not to say that. I try not to say I'm a lesbian or anything like that because I don't want to misrepresent. I don't want to cause more damage because you might not always have the opportunity to explain in detail. I don't want people to think it's a game or something you could jump in and out of or a hat you could put on. These are people's lives. These are people's identities. They don't get to, what I'm saying? So I really don't know how to represent the queer community as myself properly. What I do know how to do is be authentic in my journey and say, this is my experiences. This is what I've done. This is what I've done. And this is where I am now. And hope that the queer community still loves me and accepts me because I still advocate for them. I still show up for them. I still stand behind them. Um, even when they weren't the nicest to me, I still love them and I'm still here with them on the fight and the journey. And I'll go toe to toe with anybody about my people. I just don't know the proper terms or terminology to someone who formerly exclusively dated women and no longer does that. So, you know,
Gotcha.
that's a journey in itself. And that's why places like the queer conference are perfect because it helps people affirm who they are and get the right terminology and know how to present right and properly and know what to say and understand boundaries and show up authentically and not be judged.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you for sharing that.
Ooh, I can't believe I said that out loud in front of people. I've said it
Well,
in conversation,
well,
passing.
thank you for saying and expressing how you feel out loud. Um, it was what you said was it was packed. There, I think there were a lot of layers there, but I think the thing that stood out most to me about what you said is that you've gotten to a point where you recognize what you need for you and what fits best for you. And that's important. That is really, really important. You know, before you ask me, what is one thing that needs to be said that's not said, and I said, mind your own damn business. And so, I think that to your point, it seems to me as if there is a part of you that has been hurt by the judgment of the community. And I get it, I know quite a few people who have at one time identified with the LGBT community and then realized that that particular identity no longer fit them. But the thing about sexuality is that it is very fluid.
Very fluid.
It is very fluid. And I think so many of us grew up in a space where we're taught that with sexuality, you either have to be this way or this way. You know, either you're straight or you're gay. Um, and there's so many studies, so many academic studies out there that really that says that that's not true.
It's just not true.
You know, um, but I think that a part of it too is sometimes we get so caught up in how people judge us that we start to judge ourselves. And what I hear from you is that I think one of the things that you are trying to bring meaning to is how do you show up in your authenticity without judging yourself? And I think once you figure that out, it won't matter whether you call yourself queer, straight, bisexual, pansexual, sapiosexual. It's not going to matter. And I think you have to go through this journey to get to what is comfortable for you and be able to call yourself or not call yourself whatever you want to call yourself or not call yourself. You don't have to call yourself anything if you don't want to.
Well, you know what it is? I don't want to deny a community that I am a part of. I just don't know. I want to be very careful with the messaging because it is very dangerous and you want to make sure that the messaging is clear. I don't I want the messaging to be clear.
I
And I
see,
don't
I see that. And I mean, and this could be a 3 hour conversation. So I'll just say this. Different people enter different relationships for different reasons. Different people enter different relationships for different reasons. You might enter a relationship for one reason. I might enter the same relationship for a completely different reason. And at the end of the day, it's about the relationship that you have with yourself and being able to articulate to whomever you're in relationship with what this meaning is for you, what the meaning is for you. And sometimes I think we get caught up with this whole meaning thing that if what it means for me doesn't mesh with what it means for you, there has to be a conflict. It doesn't. It really doesn't.
it doesn't. Oof.
There is enough of the community to go around for everybody.
Woo.
Everybody.
Whew, that was a word, guys. That was a word. That was a word. Like she said, we can go on for 3 hours. That was a word, guys. See, she didn't know I was gonna sneak that in on her. So that put her. We was in a consultation just now. That put her in there. Thank you, Dr. Bates, for not just showing up, but showing up with honesty and vulnerability and intention.
And
This
thank you for
interview
the
was
same.
supposed to be this
Thank
interview was
you for the
supposed to
same.
be 30 minutes, but it was so many
Oh, wow.
things that need to be touched on, and it was too good to cut short. I mean, from your presence to your practice to your truth, you are really a gift to this work in this world. Your voice is soothing, by the way.
Thank you.
This is, creating a space for Black queer women that's needed ever, more than ever. And for everyone watching, if it's something that cracked open something within you within this conversation, triggered something, and you brought something within you that need to be spoken on, or a conversation you need to text someone about, oh, hey, wait, I need to ask more questions to my partner or to my mother, or, anything you're experiencing. I know this conversation hit a nerve. I know you linked into this conversation. I know that this conversation is the start of some healing for a lot of people. I know I've learned some things and I've took some mental notes. And this has been what's going on with Swag Her. I'm Topanga, and we do it for the culture and the community. Where can they find you at, Dr. Bates?
They can find me at drdbates.com. They can find me on Facebook at Self Solstice, SELFSOULSTICE. And that is also my Instagram handle as well.
Uh, you know, for this woman who's reclaiming softness as her strategy, stay soft, stay honest, stay free. We'll see you next time. Thank you, Dr. Bates.
Thank you, Topanga. It
This
was really
was
great conversing
no,
with you.
this was
Thank you so much for having
beautiful. No, this was absolutely beautiful. I cannot wait to go back to and watch this. This was we got spicy, we got deep, we got soft, we got personal. And these are the kind of conversations that need to be had. The media and these strategic, stuffy interviews that don't do anything for people. No, we need to have real conversations. This felt like we was on Red Table Talk. I thought we was, I,
Oh!
I thought, I thought Jada was in the building. This was, but that's what that is what Swag Her is doing, and that's the direction we're going in, making these spaces for women and seeing what's really
It's
going on.
beautiful. It's
Uh,
beautiful.
I,
And like you said, much needed.
I can't wait to go back and watch this. I did not expect this. I did not. I knew we would go over your accolades and the amazing person you were, but I mean, this was an honest conversation, and that's where
Mm.
healing starts. Thank you, Dr.
Ashe.
Bates.
Ashe. Thank
What's
you.
going on? Bye.
Bye.